A few months back, Google got on stage and announced their big new Android redesign with Material 3 Expressive. And at the time, it seems the feedback was good, the users were happy, and I really think Google was too, considering the response from their main competitor with Apple's liquid glass reveal. I don't think that went over too well. Since that initial announcement, things have been super quiet on Google's end, and it's clear they've been working really hard in the background to get their update ready for the Pixel 10 release in the fall. But I am curious though, how are things going and how is Material 3 Expressive coming along? Thankfully, we've actually gotten quite a few updates regarding this design, as some of Google's biggest apps have been updated in preparation. So real quick, let me show you how things have changed since the initial announcement to see how the design language is shaping up, because there's actually a lot going on here. And of course, if you want to stay up to date with all things Google and Android, consider subscribing because we have a lot more content like this and we want you to be around for the ride. First up is the biggest and probably most exciting revamp, which is effectively a complete overhaul of the Phone by Google app. This is an update we got in mid-June, and it's actually a pretty significant redesign as part of Google's Material 3 Expressive update, as we have new UI elements, updated spacing, new animations, basically a complete overhaul while still looking familiar to designs in the past. Most notably, we got a redesigned UI for incoming calls, and I think it looks pretty good. One change in particular is a new horizontal swipe to answer or decline gesture. According to user feedback, this is preferred by users since it prevents accidental declines or answers, which I can definitely see, so this is a pretty huge bonus here. And there are nice little animations when interacting with that horizontal gesture as well, where the phone icon changes shape and the answer/decline text fades in and out of the background. A nice touch, if you ask me. And you'll also see another pretty big redesign with the contact's profile photo being displayed front and center in this Material 3-esque shape, which I think does look much more appealing. The Recents tab has also received some minor changes too. It's a bit more simplified, as all calls that show in this feed are placed in rectangular cards with rounded corners, which is definitely better for the sake of organization. The old tags for the all, missed, and so on now appear as little chip-style tabs, making it much easier to filter your recent calls history. Plus, there are a ton of little visual tweaks in general, with new rounded boxes, a more vibrant color palette for theming, and new animations sprinkled out here and there. Overall, I think these updates not only make the app look better, but also make it a bit easier to use, which is a huge plus. It's a much needed change if you ask me, but I think they do need to take it a step further. On the 9 to 5 Google website, I've seen quite a few comments saying the dialer itself does need an update, which I do agree with. I think a visual refresh would really complete the look, but otherwise, it is a great start. Google Photos also got some interesting revisions as of late. Google has already teased the Material 3 Expressive redesign for Google Photos, and some aspects are now live while others are still being worked on, so it seems. The Albums view on Android, for example, got some pretty notable changes. We now have a floating toolbar that handles actions for sharing, adding photos, and editing the album, with the Sort Photos button being moved to the top bar for a cleaner look. And while you're in the edit view, there is now a docked toolbar at the bottom for adding photos, text, and locations, which is a huge improvement for reachability, especially on larger phones, where in previous versions it was all awkwardly placed in the top bar. You should also see 2 cards available at the top for editing highlights and the album cover as well. And these are just the early changes. It looks like Google is updating these apps little by little, so while the Albums view does look cleaner now, the rest of Google Photos has yet to be updated. It's important to note though that we did get a preview of other changes coming in the future, like a total redesign of the photo editor. We're set to get a new full screen view during the editing process, showing us the date, time, and location at the top. The suggested tool page is getting a visual overhaul that shows you a preview of the changes, and you'll have the ability to tap specific areas of a photo to get AI suggestions from a new pop-up menu. It's a massive change that I'm definitely looking forward to, and I can't wait to see this portion of the redesign come live. The next pretty sizable Material 3 app update is for Google Meet, which is also in the middle of a redesign where we've got several changes to its interface and functionality. On the home screen, for example, we have past calls now placed in a Material 3 container, just like we saw with the phone app, and it will be a reoccurring theme, with rounded corners for the first and last call on the list, which does really clean up the page. The pre-call screen has gotten the biggest change though, with the buttons for voice and video calls getting massively bigger, probably comically large if we're being honest here. At the top of the screen, the profile image, name, and email address are now placed centered in a pill-shaped container as well. And of course, this joins the changes from earlier in the year that, in hindsight, were Material 3 Expressive inspired, like the updated control sheet. Next up are some adjustments to Google Messages. Now, at the time of this recording, these changes aren't widely live yet, and from what we've seen so far, they might look minor, but they do point to a much cleaner future for the app. We saw reports of a Material 3 redesign that puts the entire conversation thread in its own container, like we saw in the past, with rounded corners at the top. This is a subtle but important change by visually separating the conversation from the rest of the UI. It does make the chat feel more focused and less cluttered, which is always a good thing. We also know the plus menu, where you find things like photos and GIFs, will get its own separate pill-shaped containers to clearly indicate which menu you're viewing, but thanks to some digging from our friends at Android Authority, we have a sneak peek at even more changes, like a redesigned profile page with those larger, friendlier Material 3 style buttons. And in true Expressive fashion, those buttons will have new animations when you interact with them, making the whole experience feel more responsive and alive. These small, thoughtful additions that, when combined, really elevate the feel of an app, and I can't wait to see more Google apps embody these adjustments as well. And last but not least, we have a minor but meaningful change to the privacy dashboard within the settings menu. The entire menu now has its elements placed in those distinct Material 3 Expressive containers that we've seen in many apps, which does help organize the information much more clearly. But alongside this update we got in early July is some changes to the app permission prompts themselves. When an app asks access to your microphone, camera, or location, the pop-up you see has been updated with these new pill-shaped buttons. Same with the while using this app, only at this time, and don't allow options. They will be more visually distinct and vibrant now, which is overall good because it does make your choices clearer, making these buttons brighter and more defined. It's a small tweak, don't get me wrong, but it's a smart one that puts a little bit more clarity back in the hands of the user when it comes to managing your digital privacy. So when you take a step back and look at all these updates together, from the major overhaul to the Phones app, to adjustments to the Photos app, and subtle refinements in the privacy dashboard, you can really see Google's vision for Material 3 Expressive coming together, especially when you take into account what's coming in these QPR builds. And it's not about just making things look prettier, for a lack of a better word. It's about making the entire Pixel/Android experience more intuitive, more responsive, and frankly, more enjoyable to use, which I can confidently say Material 3 Expressive has done well in that regard. With these updates, we see Google is focused on better organization, clear actions, and delightful little animations that make the whole system feel alive, and I am all here for it. There's still a long ways to go, with plenty other apps waiting for their Expressive makeover, but the foundation is being laid piece by piece as we head towards that rumored big launch in August. But with all that said, what do you guys think? Are you a fan of the direction Google is taking with Material 3 Expressive? Which app redesign are you most excited about? Which app redesign are you most or least excited about? Let me know down in the comments below, as I'm always curious to hear what the Android community is thinking. Until next time, this has been Jordan Floyd with 9 to 5 Google. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.